Well, good morning. Glad to see you here. As I mentioned last Sunday, the topic on the table today is Gaza. I know this probably won't be a sermon that meets everyone's expectations. In fact, I've already received a pile of emails with opinions and information to help guide in the construction of this sermon. So it's the last time I'm going to mention what I'm preaching on ahead of time. Actually, I'm grateful. I'll say this. I am grateful to you. This is a conversation. We're family. It means we're in this together, right? And it's in the conversation, it's in the way we rub up against each other that something rubs off and it reveals a greater reality, right? A greater depth. Right? If we're acting as community who believes, and I believe this fundamentally, who believes God has set us here at this time in this place with purpose to be together, then it's that friction that makes us holy. It allows us to be full as a community, to be complete. That's what holy means, to be full and complete as a community. And most importantly, it allows us to be alert. See, echo chambers put us at risk of isolating ourselves, and isolation is not part of God's divine economy. It is not part of God's design for creation. C.S. Lewis, some of you have heard of C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Last Battle, captures the absurdity and futility of echo chambers in that final scene near the end when the dwarves sequester themselves in a hut, sitting in a circle in a dark room, chanting the dwarves for the dwarves. With all the other characters of Aslan's community on the outside able to see in and wonder why they're sitting there by themselves in the darkness. The gospel and the epistle today call us to be alert, so as not to stumble into the hut of darkness, where despair and anger grows, where people can convince themselves how bad somebody else is, right? Or how bad that community over there is. Because when that happens, it can lead to the end of worlds, like it ended the world for 6 million Jews in Germany during the Holocaust. And it is ending the world for people in Gaza today. So let's begin by a gritty overview of how we got to where we are. It began with the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, in which Israel declared statehood and displaced 750,000 Palestinians from their homes. In 1967, Israel launched a preemptive strike on Israel, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, leading to the occupation of East Jerusalem, the West Bank, Gaza, Sinai, and the Golan Heights. And that occupation remained central to the conflict today. In 1973, Egypt and Syria launched the Yom Kippur War to reclaim that territory, and they lost badly. The first Intifada began in 1987, which means the uprising, where the Palestinians rose up in the occupied territories to push back against Israel's occupation. The second Intifada erupted in 2000 after Ariel Sharon visited the Temple Mount. Some of you have been to the Temple Mount with me, haven't you? In 2006, Hamas won elections in Gaza as a response to the failure of the Intifadas to end occupation. Israel launched operations in the Gaza in 2009, 2012, and 2014. To quell violence that had erupted there. In 2018 and 19, there was a movement in Gaza, peaceful protests, that were met with lethal governmental force from the State of Israel. In 2021, an 11-day war erupted. By 2023, settler violence and military raids into the occupied territories had escalated dramatically. The death toll since 1948 is staggering. Around 30,000 Israelis have died, 10,000 civilians, 20,000 military personnel. Same period of time, over 100,000 Palestinians have been killed, 70,000 civilians, 30,000 military. And then came October 7th, 2023. Hamas attacked Israel in yet another battle in this 77-year war, killing 1,200 Israelis, 40 of which were children. Since then, Israel has bombed Gaza relentlessly, killing over 38,000 individuals, 17,000 of which are children. And today, right now, there's significant famine in Gaza. Now I bring this history to bear to give us just a sense of the magnitude and momentum of an ongoing conflict, both sides, and the death and trauma this has caused. Now, over the past 20 years, I have been to the Holy Land 7 times. And one pattern that I have seen perpetuated, pushed hard, is that of separation, division, segregation. Checkpoints, walls, military zones, structures all designed to keep people apart, to foment anxiety and fear. Now, the first time I went to Bethlehem, who's been to Bethlehem? Okay, so the first time I went to Bethlehem to visit the birthplace of Jesus, I was shocked. It's surrounded all the way around by 26-foot-high concrete walls with guard towers and big signs that say, warning to the Jewish people of Israel not to go in there. It is against the law for them to go in there. Place looks like a prison, absolutely. Jesus' birthplace inside prison walls. There are other more subtle examples of this division. License plates are color-coded. Right? Yellow license plates are for Israeli citizens and settlers. Green license plates are for Palestinians. The color then tells you who's driving and where they are allowed to go. The water tanks on rooftops tell another story. See them, you look out and you wonder. The white water tanks sit upon the houses of Israeli citizens, tied to solar systems that provide perpetual water. The black tanks, sitting on top of the homes, belong to the Palestinian people, and they need to be filled by water tanks that come to the home. Trash pickup in the old city is another subtle form of separation. Jewish quarter, beautiful in the old city, clean, spotless. They have trash pickup several times a week. The trash pickup in the Arab quarters and the Christian quarters happens irregularly. So when you walk through, you may pick up the impression that the Arabs are dirty. In other words, there's more than meets the eye when considering the dynamic that foments this conflict between the State of Israel and occupied Palestine. And so to be aware is to be alert, which is my message today. Be alert. Linda read it, 1 Peter. Be alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Resist him, steadfast in your faith. Now, the theology I want to point to help us remain alert, right, is the theology of incarnation. Because incarnation is about the presence of God. It's about presence, bodily, and at a particular time. This incarnation offers us two levels of engagement. First of all, the Jesus filter. We talk about the Jesus filter here at Epiphany. And second, our place, our context at any given moment in time. Not in the past, not in the future, not in the minds and intentions of others, but in our own context. When we leave our own context, we can get wholly lost in whataboutisms, like the dwarves in the hut. And so with this in mind, it's important that we look at Gaza as it is today. Not as it was in 1967, not as it was in 2006, not as it was on October 8th, 2023, but as it is today. As starvation spreads across that tiny, very densely populated piece of land upon which people live on a rubble pile of despair. And that's not hyperbole, that's actually what's happening there today. So to be alert requires our perspective, and this is important, this is hard. This is a hard thing I'm going to say. But to be alert requires that our perspective change as the circumstances change. October 8th, 2023 were particular circumstances that were horrible, and we're someplace different 2 years later. Our perspective needs to change so that we can see what is happening in front of us and not be distracted, as Peter says, by the devil. Because I'll tell you, the devil wants us to be out in the front or way in the back or in somebody else's mind, but the devil wants to distract us. That's what the devil does, because it works against God's divine economy of unity, bringing us together. The devil, it turns out, is one of the greatest propagandists ever, and wonderful at getting us to hear one side. You can just hear the settlers in the West Bank right now famously borrowing the words of Prime Minister Golda Meir when she spoke in 1967. This is one of their chants today. There's no such thing as a Palestinian people. That's out there. But they have no corner on propaganda. You hear it on the Palestinian side as well. Slogan that is popular. They pulled from the Old Testament, ironically, from the river to the sea. See, that devil's slippery. A devil is slippery, and it's happy to throw flames from either trench. So be alert. The devil wants it to make it really easy for us to other somebody else, because if we can other them, we can dehumanize them, we can kill them, we can excuse it as a tragic consequence, collateral damage. Incarnation does not permit this. We know this because of the Jesus filter, which allows for moral clarity. The question is, what would Jesus say about the situation right now? Jesus is our leader and our guide. What would Jesus say about what's happening today? Whatever is right in front of us. Moral clarity doesn't come from headlines or algorithms. It comes from really wondering what Jesus would say in a particular situation. We're lied to a lot by media personalities, by news outlets, by politicians, by political action committees. And it's only going to get worse with the manipulative power of artificial intelligence. So be alert. And let what you see in the moment inspire action. For no matter the context of our lives, we all have different contexts. We can do something when we see something that needs our attention. We can protest, we can write, we can pray, we can give, we can listen, we can encourage. We can protest, write, pray, we can listen, we can give, we can encourage. From dorm rooms to senior centers, we are called to see this crisis and ask, how might I help in making things better? Alertness, I'll also say, is not a solo journey. We are a community formed by God. We worship together, side by side, you see it, soul to soul, with people who carry different perspectives, different life experiences, different burdens, different abilities, all of whom are welcome outside the hut where the people of hope belong. Which reminds me of a story I'd like to share. A friend of mine told me about his life. He's of Arab descent. And for years, actually, ever since he sort of graduated from high school, he has been an active protester for peace in the Holy Land. In 2009, he was out in the streets protesting the Israeli government incursion into Gaza. He was out in the streets again in 2012. He was out again in 2014. And a lot of people who knew him and appreciated his perspective also dismissed his passion as a natural outgrowth of his ethnic identity. And he told me the other day, he said, now as he's witnessing young people around the world taken to the streets, alert to the crisis in Gaza, he's filled with hope. A hope rooted in the clarity of incarnation, in the moment. These are young people for whom this is their first crisis. Let that sink in. Which makes it a foundational one in their moral formation and a sense of agency in the world and responsibility for the world. For many, this is the moment when their eyes are opening to the deeper currents of injustice and suffering. Now, at the beginning of the sermon, I recounted the long and tragic history of violence between Palestinians and Israelis. These end-of-world moments. And across the globe and across time, there have been many, many end-of-world moments. Because every generation comes to maturity within a particular crucible of crisis that forms their moral conscience. Maybe you can think of the one in your own life. Maybe it was Vietnam. Right? Maybe it was apartheid South Africa. Maybe it was famine in Ethiopia. For our young people at this time, this is theirs. This is everywhere online in real time, from many different angles. And the clarity they see, the compassion they feel, it's real, it is authentic. Right? To dismiss their moral outrage as simply anti-Semitic, or to reduce them to being simple tools of Hamas, is to deeply misunderstand what it means to be young in a broken world. Awake to suffering, awake to power, and beginning to recognize that they have a role to play in something that is bigger than themselves. It's their first time out of the hut. Right? It's their first time out of the hut built by their parents or their community or their culture or their country. So they're the reason that my friend feels for the first time in his life that there is hope for peace in the Holy Land. And I hope so too. Not because things are getting better, they are not getting better. But because so many people are alert. You know, as people of hope, us as Jesus followers, we believe change is possible because we believe that every single soul matters to God. Every soul. Right? Israeli and Palestinians, Muslim, Jews, Christians, kids, old people. We act because we are trained to see through the Jesus filter. And even if we do not live to see the end of the conflict in the Holy Land, our work still matters. Because as Paul wrote in his letter to the Romans, who hopes for what can be seen? We hope for what cannot yet be seen. And so we stay alert to the moment, right? Not stuck in the past, not out there in the future, not attributing intent to somebody else, but meeting the present as it is and with compassion, just as Jesus would. And so I leave you with this reflection on Gaza, its history, the work of the devil to distract and divide over time, and the invitation to be alert. Because if we are alert, whatever our capacity, whatever our context, we can still be part of the hope that bends history toward justice and reveals the reality of the kingdom of God.